Hey there, intelligent automation community. Welcome back to another Reveal Group Tech Talk. And this is a little bit of exciting. It's been 1 year since we started the Tech Talk series, except I've been on the other side of the camera every single time. So it's nice that the powers that be finally let me be in front of you on camera. So by way of introduction, my name's Josh Noble. I run the innovation team at Reveal Group. Prior to being with Reveal Group, I was with Blue Prism for about 5.5 years or so. So got to see RPA through the meteoric rise over that period of time. And well, exciting here. We're going to be talking about RPA Supervisor today. So from RPA Supervisor, Wes, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Josh. So a way of introduction, Wesley Dunn, partner manager here at RPA Supervisor. I've actually been here or will be here 2 years in February. The majority of my time was as a solution engineer, so we can have a look at the product today. But prior to this, I was at Automation Anywhere for 2.5 years. And then really the overarching kind of area of my background is software development. So I was in software development for 10 odd years.
So technically, Wes and I guess we're competitors for some period of time there, but we're coming together to solve the world's problems around orchestration. So maybe Wes, why don't you dive us into, give us a bit of an overview of what we're going to talk through today?
Yeah, absolutely. So today we're going to be thinking about orchestration as a topic, but then we're going to look how really RPA Supervisor fits into that topic and looking at key fundamental elements of RPA Supervisor and discussing them.
Very good. Let's get into it. Okay, Wes. So every time that we speak about RPA Supervisor, we tend to break everything down into 4 different categories. We have intelligent orchestration, automated operations, real-time insights, and integration. So maybe we'll go through that piecemeal, starting with the first one with intelligent orchestration.
Yeah, absolutely. Intelligent orchestration fundamentally changes the way kind of the operational teams think about scheduling processes for execution. Effectively, the schedulers that they use today is retired, and they move over to this more business-focused approach around intelligent orchestration. And that uses kind of SLAs to drive the work. And the added benefit there is that you have things like prioritization. But the added benefit of all of this really is that from a business point of view, you can add value for being way more responsive, and you can give a higher service level, because effectively, though the SLA might be, I don't know, an hour or so, if there is resource to execute the process, it will do it there and then. And then because the algorithm is being so effective, what you do get is capacity. So this is capacity for you to really grow in and develop scale. And then also what it does, it lowers the total cost of ownership of our overarching business process when it comes to the business case. So effectively, you can think about spreading automation across the whole of the organization where they couldn't actually do that before.
So lower cost to run each one of your processes because we're being more efficient with how we're doing that, so we can bring more out there. I'd also like to say that I find that it opens up a lot of opportunities around the human in the loop attended automation type of use cases. Those use cases where you need to have a digital worker or a bot, a process available to help you do work fairly expediently. So if you do a password reset process, you want the robot to go out and be able to do that password reset for you pretty quick and not have to wait necessarily 30 minutes for it to get around to do that. And by having that scheduling capability, that orchestration capability, there's a higher probability we can bring a robot to the top of the queue to be able to take on that type of work.
Yeah, absolutely. And with RPA Supervisor, kind of the human loop concept coincides with the SLA, because then you can be dynamic in the execution. So really, when you have one process, you can have many people attacking that at one time. And effectively, how do you deliver that SLA dynamically without affecting kind of the breaches of the SLA? And that's how we've developed human in the loop, not only to deliver that, but really, really simple and deliver it across the whole organization. Once you have the module, there's no kind of overarching cost when it comes to per head distribution.
So, Wes, it occurred to me as we were chatting through this that we're actually in a couple minutes here going to show a lot in RPA Supervisor around the intelligent orchestration, automated operations, and real-time insights. But the one that's a little more difficult to visualize is the integration kind of pillar around there. So maybe you could cover that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And the integration hub itself is made up of key features. One of them we've already spoken about, which is human in the loop. But really an intriguing one that we've introduced lately is it's called multi-vendor support, but effectively it will be called RPA Supervisor Master, where if you've got a multi-vendor approach, effectively you can have different control rooms and orchestrators. You can combine all them through one window. And because we're touching on orchestration, you'll be able to orchestrate, and then we're going to touch on analytics. And effectively with the analytics, it becomes quite interesting because then not only can you view them in a singular form, you can also aggregate them all together. The other element within Integration Hub would be easy to use connectors. They would be things like ServiceNow, but a great example would be Microsoft Power Automate. What that can be used for effectively is that we use today a license to monitor a file or monitor an email. Power Automate has been built to do this exceptionally well. So effectively, Power Automate can monitor an email or an inbox. And then when the email actually arrives, it will apply logic and it will trigger a process or a task in RPA Supervisor, but be governed in execution. So the overarching view of Integration Hub is right there.
Okay, so that's probably enough talk about what this does in theory. Why don't we turn off the cameras, turn on the screen share, and maybe show you a bit about how RPA Supervisor works behind the hood.
Absolutely.
So, Wes, I've seen things like IATA and BP Cloud and the upcoming Blue Prism Director, which are technically machine learning based scheduling capabilities. However, in general, they're going primarily based off of just an SLA and a target SLA approach. And so if everybody in the organization says, I want a 1-minute SLA for my process, well, there's not a whole lot of machine learning type of capability that you can apply into that. And so what's different about what RPA Supervisor is doing here versus something like those more kind of single layer machine learning aspects?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you've got to think about with RPA Supervisor is underneath this is an awesome algorithm that's been really developed and honed over many years. And effectively, it doesn't just concentrate on things like the SLA. So effectively here, you would have a response time. And when you add in things like a response time, if you would add in a complete within 10, for example, granted that is an SLA, but it's also a heavy prioritization. It's high value. And as you build the layers of parameters in here, things like the working hours, which it takes into consideration, it understands when it should be and when it shouldn't be working, then also the machines that it can use. And then effectively, if we think about kind of a process that will be triggered on pending items within a queue, you can have a look at the queue, you can have a look at the tasks, the tagging, sorry. But really this is kind of viewable, but underneath RPA Supervisor is monitoring all sorts of different things. So one of the key changes here that it understands how long it takes to start an individual process, how long it takes to run, and then also how long it takes to finish. But then if we take the example that we've got here of really a process that needs to be completed within 10 minutes, but it's also working off a queue, how can it deliver the volume within the queue dynamically and really execute that process and prioritize that above others and really make them intelligent decisions to execute work now. So effectively, you can see there's processes here that are executing. And say, for instance, we had a high volume that came in at, I don't know, 1 o'clock, for example. It has the ability then to make the judgment of, I've got 4 resources, I need to stop 4 processes, and I need to use all of them to execute this SLA, otherwise it may look poor or it may exceed. So really with this, RPA Supervisor is monitoring everything from an operational point of view that gets fed into the algorithm every couple of seconds to make them key decisions. And that is the huge differentiator here.
Very cool. And I would think out of this as well, this gives me an idea of if I need to add more digital workers, runtimes, bots to my environment as well, or I'm going to just keep missing those SLAs.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where RPA Supervisor comes in of being very interactive, telling you that you're going to miss an SLA, either it's looking poor or it's exceeded. Fundamentally, that is a first or early warning of an actual problem. But then when you're having these kind of indications, this is where the power of insights comes in, and you can really get down to having a look at instance expectations and then the wider widgets that you can add in to make these key decisions moving forward. Josh, there's a key question around really the parameters that you would need to onboard processes in RPA Supervisor. Based on your experience with many customers now, how does Reveal go about that?
Yeah, so we captured this information up in our earlier kind of defined design stages. In Reveal Group's version of our process definition document, within our functional requirements questionnaire, we're asking a lot of these questions already. So information about your workload, your SLAs, are there specific operating hours that we need to work within? So we're capturing that up front in the PDD area. Awesome. So Wes, earlier on, we just briefly talked on that RPA Supervisor, in addition to helping with the scheduling components of things, also helps to reduce the overhead costs and those late night support scrambles by intervening where necessary, where things are going wrong. And what's unique about RPA Supervisor around that is that it sits on separate infrastructure from the RPA platform alone. So it's able to intervene on different things than the RPA platform. So maybe you could show us a couple bits around how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we spoke about earlier on was the automated operation side of things. And effectively what we have in front of us here is the ability to define different policies when it comes to RPA processes, and then also the runtime resources that we're actually using. And when we think about runtime resources, effectively here you have multiple options to think about. You can reboot the machine, you can log out, you can also be warned if there's a problem, for example. So if we just think about rebooting a machine, because now we have the algorithm to rely on, it can shift and lift and delegate work, we can have a look at the profile itself. So we touched on this earlier when we looked at intelligent orchestration. And effectively, if you had 10 RPA processes, you can have 10 different profiles and slightly tweak them accordingly. But in here, we spoke about deadline rules and really notifying when this may happen. But now we've set this policy up here to say, reboot a machine if there's a problem, then we can think about this. So we can say, reset the machine, which now means reboot the machine if it's been frozen for 1 minute. And then effectively you can achieve that if it's missing an action or it's overrunning. And really the added benefit here is that if we've got 10 resources and we reboot 2, the algorithm knows it has 8, and then it will make the kind of the changes on the fly to deliver the SLA for the processes that need to be done now. And when the resources come available, RPA Supervisor will instantly use them. The other profile that you can think about, and there's some really key things in here that I love. So not only can you notify if the resource has been offline, there is a concept of terminations, which we'll touch on another time, but this area here, which is provisioning. Provisioning means when we tell a process to start, it doesn't get to running. So that kind of no man's land in the middle is costing us license, it's costing us resource, but effectively it's driving no value whatsoever. This area for provisioning, for example, can totally eradicate that and effectively will always get in to deliver the value that we require. So that is an overview of underperformance. I hope that's okay.
Perfect.
So we gave you an introduction into intelligent orchestration. We briefly touched on automated operations, where we can create a profile that will monitor the process and execution, but also then remediate and then notify on certain issues. We also touched on RPA Supervisor, not only kind of adding in layers of expectation, but also the items that it uses to deliver the execution, different parameters of analytics. And effectively, with all these different analytics within RPA Supervisor, you can take advantage of them. And you can start thinking about creating meaningful dashboards. This one here would be for the COE, for example, where they've got clear overview of SLAs across the board, the resource statuses, time back to business, but also then things like SLA adherence within the 24 hours, and really giving you an indication of health moving forward across the whole estate. You can really up your game when it comes to these as well, because you can create these dashboards in a short period of time. You can create one that can serve many, and you can distribute to your heart's content without any restriction. Here we can also have a look at instance and exceptions in the last 24 hours, things like operational performance. And then also what you can start to think about is creating dashboards for you, or giving the power to the process owners. RPA Supervisor as a product's been developed to be really, really easy and remove the technical overhead when it comes to creating these dashboards. I will just click on 3 here just to show you how easy the dashboard creation is. I've added 3 widgets that we call them, and then with these widgets, you can tailor them to your view and then drag them around and move them around. And with these dashboards, you can create something meaningful in a short period of time, which will have the biggest effect. That's the overarching view of the dashboard capability of RPA Supervisor.
So, Wes, I know there's something like, I want to call it 50 different dashboard widgets that are in RPA Supervisor. Are there specific unique ones that you haven't seen in core RPA tools as a standalone?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're building these constantly all of the time. Again, I just want to touch on how flexible we are with the customers. So really, if there isn't anything there, we can automatically build it and distribute. But one of the fundamental things that we're talking about today is the orchestration and the delivery of SLA. Within the widgets, you have kind of a section over in the top right-hand corner where you can touch on what we call the workflows. And really things like the SLA adherence, the SLA outcome, and then the overarching kind of touch on task run schedule. All these things I haven't seen anywhere else that an effectively RPA Supervisor does it because of the fundamental change in the way that we're executing processes.
And so, Wes, all this dashboarding capability, is this just for your RPA controller team that's doing command and control type of operations, like a digital cockpit, or is this also for business sponsors, managers, what have you, that are out there? Who typically looks at this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that we developed this is to make it as easy as possible, but also unlimited distribution. So effectively, every area of the business that's interested in RPA can now have that level of insight that they've never had before. And effectively, the kind of the added benefit of this, when we've discussed in the past, is that the process owners that were constantly attacking the COE for information effectively have in real time information that they can depend upon to make key decisions moving forward. So really the distribution of this is unlimited. And again, building that level of trust that distributes throughout the whole organization.
All right, so let's get back to the kind of the face-to-face here. We'll drop the screen share. So Wes, I do appreciate you walking us through RPA Supervisor, kind of through some details in screen share. It's a lot easier to see it versus just visualize it in your head on how it's theoretically supposed to work. So I guess to wrap us up on the tech talk, let's land on what's in the roadmap for RPA Supervisor. What do you have coming up for us next?
Some exciting stuff. And also what I touched on earlier on was the master RPA Supervisor. Multiple instances mixed together, viewable from one window where we can then orchestrate and we can then also view analytics that could be either separate or singular. One for me is the universal queuing that we're creating, really looking at all the different mechanisms of queuing, taking all the best bits and putting them together and then delivering that for our clients. So that fundamentally allows you then to kind of glue together lots of different platforms, adding to the queue, delegating the SLA and driving the work, but then also thinking outside the box. So now when we think about driving work with SLAs, also adding a value driven execution and then adding in a cross matrix to deliver something really special. And I know that you've got your own views on that, Josh.
Yeah, it comes back to something I mentioned earlier, where that situation of everybody puts in a 1-minute SLA, not a whole lot of scheduling and prioritization that you can do to balance with just that one metric in there. But if you can assign a dollar value to every one of your processes, maybe a potential fine by not hitting an SLA to your processes, now that gets very interesting on how we rank and prioritize what we get done first, second, third.
So just as we're wrapping up now, 2 things to look at. One would be the Cisco webinar with Reveal Group and RPA Supervisor, and also Robo Review. That's awesome. And then secondly, I've had immense feedback on this, and it's Josh's overarching view on RPA Supervisor for sales reps. So please take a look at that as well.
And if anybody's interested to find out more, schedule demos, dig it into the weeds, contact Wes or I. We can get into it with RPA Supervisor and Reveal Group, talk to you about what we're doing together. Until next time, have a great holiday. We're getting right around the corner on that, and we will check you out on the next Tech Talk.